She was invisible, the ghost at the party, laughed at by her own ex-husband and his new billionaire heiress wife. She stood there clutching a lukewarm glass of champagne, her simple vintage dress a mark of shame in a room dripping with diamonds. Every eye at the Golden Gate Patrons' Ball was on her, waiting for her to break, waiting for her to run. But they weren't prepared for what happened next. They weren't prepared for him. The one man in the room more powerful than all of them combined. And he was walking right toward her. The air at the Legion of Honor was thick with the scent of tuberose and old money. Chandeliers glittering like captive constellations poured buttery light onto the marble floors. This was the Golden Gate Patrons' Ball, the undisputed peak of the San Francisco social calendar. And Audrey Vance was a weed in an orchid garden. It had been 2 years since the divorce. 2 years since Noah Sterling, her husband of a decade, had traded her in. The trade was by all accounts an upgrade. He had swapped Audrey, a moderately successful ceramicist with a quiet laugh and laugh lines, for Danielle DeWitt, an heiress, with a face untouched by emotion and a trust fund that could destabilize a small nation. Audrey hadn't wanted to come. Her invitation was a fluke, a lingering courtesy from a museum curator who had once commissioned her work, a woman who clearly hadn't gotten the memo that Audrey was no longer Mrs. Sterling. She felt the eyes on her. Her dress, a vintage emerald green Halston she'd bought on First Dibs, had felt elegant and timeless in her small Sausalito apartment. Here, surrounded by a sea of custom Oscar de la Renta and shimmering Givenchy, it felt like a costume. Audrey, goodness! Audrey turned. It was Beatrice Finch, the sharp-tongued columnist for the Nob Hill Gazette. Her pen was a scalpel, and she was looking at Audrey as if she were a particularly fascinating and slightly moldy specimen. "Beatrice, it's a lovely evening," Audrey said, her voice tighter than she'd intended. "Isn't it?" Beatrice's eyes did a quick, insulting scan. Up, down. "How brave of you to come. Especially solo." The unsaid words hung in the air. "Now that you're a nobody." Before Audrey could form a reply, a ripple of laughter, high and brittle as spun glass, cut through the orchestral swell. Danielle. She was holding court near the grand staircase, a vision in voluminous, almost offensively bright fuchsia. She was flanked by her 2 inseparable shadows, bits of social shrapnel named Chloe and Annabelle. And next to her, looking both proud and profoundly neutered, was Noah. He saw Audrey. His smile, the one that had once been her entire world, faltered. He looked away, turning his attention back to his new wife, who was now pointing one beringed finger directly at Audrey. Oh, God. No. But it was too late. The trio was advancing. Danielle moved like a predator, all grace and undeniable threat. "Audrey, darling." Danielle cooed, her voice loud enough for everyone in their immediate vicinity to hear. She stopped just close enough to force Audrey to smell her perfume, something expensive and suffocating like a flower that knew it was poisonous. "Danielle, Noah." Audrey nodded, her knuckles white on her champagne flute. "I just had to come over and say how much I adore your commitment to sustainability," Danielle said, gesturing to Audrey's dress. "Vintage is just so charming. It reminds me of my grandmother's attic." Chloe and Annabelle tittered on cue. "And here you are all by yourself," Danielle continued, her eyes wide with mock pity. "Noah isn't that sweet. She came all by herself." Noah shuffled. "Sarah, come on." "What, I think it's wonderful she's putting herself out there. After all," she leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hiss, "it must be so hard to re-enter the world when you've, well, you know, slipped so far out of it." It was a social execution, plain and simple. Audrey could feel the stares, a dozen pairs of eyes, all witnessing her humiliation. She looked at Noah, a desperate silent plea. "Say something. Stop her. Remember me." Noah met her gaze for a fraction of a second. She saw panic guilt, and then, worst of all, nothing. He cleared his throat and looked at the ceiling. He chose his new wife. He chose the money. He chose to let her twist the knife. Audrey's eyes burned. The music seemed to fade, replaced by a rushing sound in her ears. She was trapped. Danielle smiled, victorious. "If you'll excuse me," Audrey whispered, her voice cracking. She had to leave. She would run to the bathroom, then the coat check, and disappear. "Oh, but you just got here," Danielle said, stepping slightly to block her path. It was in that moment, as Audrey felt the fragile walls of her composure begin to crumble, that the entire atmosphere of the grand hall changed. It wasn't a loud noise. It was a vacuum. The chatter near the entrance simply stopped. The silence spread, moving through the crowd like a cold front. The orchestra faltered for a beat. A man had entered. He was late, which was a power move in itself. He wasn't flanked by security, but he didn't need to be. The space just cleared around him. He was tall, dressed in a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo that was a masterpiece of understated perfection. His hair was dark, his features sharp, and he moved with a panther-like grace that was utterly at odds with the stiff posturing of the other men in the room. "Good Lord," Beatrice Finch whispered, forgetting Audrey entirely. "It's Julian Carter." The name echoed in the silence. Julian Carter. Even Audrey, who had actively avoided society news for 2 years, knew that name. Carter wasn't just San Francisco rich. He wasn't new money tech like Noah had desperately aspired to be. He was global rich. He was the reclusive, almost mythical CEO of Carter Industries, a behemoth that swallowed competitors whole in areas from AI to green energy. He was old money lineage combined with a shark's instinct for the future. He never attended these things. Ever. Danielle's head snapped toward him. Her mouth, which had been twisted in a victorious smirk, fell slightly open. Here was the true apex predator. She immediately smoothed her dress, a flicker of avarice in her eyes. This was the only man in the city who outranked her, her father, and everyone she knew combined. Julian Carter paused at the entrance, his eyes scanning the room. They were a cool, assessing blue, and they seemed to miss nothing. The mayor started to walk toward him. A senator raised a hand. Carter gave them a curt, dismissive nod, and they stopped. He began to walk. He walked past the mayor. He walked past the senator. He walked directly past Danielle DeWitt, who had positioned herself perfectly in his path and offered a dazzling high-wattage smile. He didn't even glance at her. It was as if she were a piece of furniture. The entire room, Audrey included, watched his progress. He was moving with purpose, his gaze fixed on her. Audrey's heart did a strange, painful lurch. He's not. He can't be. He was. He didn't slow down until he was standing directly in front of her, so close she could feel the warmth radiating from him. He was even taller up close. He looked down at her, and the cold, assessing look vanished, replaced by something so warm and intensely familiar it stole her breath. He smiled. Not a polite social smile, but a real one. A smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Audrey," he said. His voice was a low baritone, and it vibrated through her. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Audrey just stared, mute. Her brain was short-circuiting. "Who is this? How does he know my name?" Behind her, she heard a sound, a small, strangled gasp. It was Danielle. Julian Carter ignored them all. His focus was entirely, devastatingly on Audrey. He gently, firmly took her left hand. His touch was electric. "You look beautiful," he said, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "That green, it was always your color." Always. She finally found her voice, but it was just a whisper. I'm sorry. Do I?" He looked into her eyes, and in their blue depths, she suddenly saw it. It wasn't just Julian Carter, the billionaire. It was the way his left eyebrow quirked slightly when he smiled. It was the small, faint scar just below his jawline. Her blood ran cold, then hot. "Jamie," she breathed. The smile widened. "I've missed you, Elle." Before she could process the temporal shock that Jamie was Julian Carter, He turned. He didn't release her hand. Instead, he drew her slightly in front of him, a protective, possessive gesture. He faced the stunned, silent group. Noah was as white as the marble columns. Danielle's face was a grotesque mask of confusion and pure, unadulterated rage. Beatrice Finch had her phone out, but her hand was shaking so much she couldn't possibly be typing. "Beatrice," Julian said, his voice now carrying the cool command she'd first seen. "Wonderful to see you. I trust you'll be the first to congratulate us." He looked at Noah, his eyes flat and cold. "Noah, Danielle, you remember my fiancée, Audrey." There is no sound quite as specific as a Baccarat crystal champagne flute shattering on a marble floor. It was Danielle's. The crash echoed in the profound, stunned silence of the ballroom. 100 conversations stopped. The orchestra, attempting a transition into a piece by Vivaldi, petered out into a confused scrape of violins. Fiancée. The word hung in the air, supercharged, impossible. Audrey's head was spinning. Fiancée Jamie Julian Carter. It was a cascade of information her brain couldn't parse. She felt a wave of dizziness, and Julian's grip on her hand tightened, steadying her. "What did you say?" Danielle's voice was a venomous rasp. She had forgotten to be charming. All the finishing school polish was gone, revealing the raw, spoiled entitlement beneath. Noah just goggled, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He looked from Julian to Audrey and back again, his expression one of complete, catastrophic disbelief. Julian didn't even look at Danielle. He was looking at Beatrice Finch, the columnist, who was now staring at Audrey as if she'd just sprouted wings. "I said," Julian repeated, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the stunned room, "that I am here tonight with my fiancée, Audrey Vance. I'm surprised you didn't know, Beatrice. I thought you were supposed to be on top of these things." It was a public rebuke, a dismissal of the woman who held the power to make or break social careers. Beatrice Finch turned a dull, mottled red. Mr. Carter, this is news." "Is it?" Julian replied smoothly. "We've been keeping it private. We're private people." He then turned his full attention to Audrey, his expression softening once more. "But tonight felt like the right time to share our happiness." He was acting. This had to be an act. A glorious, insane, protective act. But why? He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. The movement was intimate, seen by everyone. "Play along," he whispered, his voice for her alone. "Trust me. I'll explain everything. Just trust me, Jamie. The boy who had lived on ramen noodles and optimism. The boy who had held her while she cried over a failed kiln firing. The boy who had disappeared. He was here, and he was Julian Carter. And he had just called her his fiancée. Audrey, who had been seconds from fleeing in tears, felt a new strange sensation. It wasn't courage, it was defiance. She looked at Danielle's furious, contorted face. She looked at Noah, who looked like he'd just seen his stock portfolio evaporate. She took a breath. She turned her hand over and laced her fingers with Julian's. "I'm sorry we're late, darling," Audrey said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I had trouble with well, you know." Julian's eyes lit up with a spark of approval. "It doesn't matter. You're here now." He turned back to the gobsmacked trio. "Now, if you'll excuse us, I believe I promised Audrey a dance, and we need to discuss the new wing with the curator. Audrey has agreed to consult on the acquisitions." He didn't wait for a reply. He simply put his hand on the small of her back and steered her away. The crowd didn't just part. It practically recoiled, as if from a source of immense heat and light. They walked past the shattered glass of Danielle's flute. They walked past a visibly trembling Beatrice Finch, who was now typing furiously into her phone with both thumbs. Audrey didn't look back. As they reached the center of the dance floor, the orchestra, jolted back to life, began to play a slow, sweeping waltz. Julian pulled her into his arms. "My God, Jamie," she whispered, her head spinning as he expertly led her into the steps. "What have you done?" "I'm not sure." he whispered back, his hand warm and firm on her waist. But look at me, Elle. Don't look at them. She met his eyes, the familiar blue, deeper perhaps, wiser, more pained, but still Jamie. You're Julian Carter. She stated the fact, still feeling alien. I am, he said. And I'm your fiancé. You are. For tonight at least, he said. Unless you'd prefer not to be. She looked over his shoulder. Every single person in the room was staring at them, not with pity, not with contempt, but with awe, confusion, and a frantic, desperate curiosity. Danielle was being forcibly dragged away by Noah, her face a mask of thunder. Audrey looked back at Julian. No, she said, a slow, dangerous smile touching her own lips for the first time in years. For tonight, I am most definitely your fiancé. Julian danced her through one song, a polite, formal waltz that felt anything but. His hand on her back was a brand. The entire ballroom was a blur of out-of-focus faces, all turned toward them. The power dynamic of the room had not just shifted, it had been detonated. Audrey Vance the Ghost was now the sun around which every satellite suddenly desperately wanted to orbit. Before the song ended, Julian leaned in. We need to talk. Somewhere private. He led her not toward the lavatories or a quiet corridor, but through a set of imposing double doors she hadn't even noticed marked Patrons Lounge. A security guard built like a refrigerator saw them recognize Julian and simply unclipped the velvet rope holding the door open. They stepped through and the noise of the gala was instantly muffled. They were in a dark-paneled library. Julian didn't stop. He crossed the room to a set of French doors and pushed them open. The cold, sharp air of the San Francisco night hit them. They were on a private terrace high above the city with a staggering perfect view of the Golden Gate Bridge lit like a string of rubies against the black void of the Pacific. Audrey walked to the balustrade, breathing in the fog. Her adrenaline was so high she felt like she was floating. She turned. He was standing by the door watching her. The shadows on the terrace were kind, stripping away the billionaire and leaving just him. Jamie, she said the name, feeling strange and right all at once. You were Jamie. My Jamie. I was, he said, walking slowly toward her. I still am. I got lost. Lost. You didn't get lost, Jamie. You vanished. You were in Berkeley with me in that drafty, awful apartment coating on a laptop held together with duct tape. We were happy. We were going to build a life. And then you said you had a family emergency in Singapore. It was, he said, his voice raw. You were gone for 3 months. You sent 2 emails. 2. I wrote you every day. I called. The number was disconnected. I thought you were dead. Or worse, that you'd just left me. I would never have left you, Elle. He was standing in front of her now. He looked tormented. What I told you was the truth, just not the whole truth. It wasn't an emergency. It was a hostile takeover, my uncle. He was trying to liquidate Carter Industries and sell it for parts after my father's accident. Audrey's mind flashed back. Your father, you said he was an engineer. You never... He was, Julian said with a bitter laugh. He engineered a global logistics empire. I am Julian Carter, as in Carter Industries. I never told you because... God, Elle. I was 22. I was terrified. Everyone I'd ever met only wanted the name. They wanted the money. And then I met you in a life drawing class you were acing, and I was failing. You were brilliant and funny, and you didn't care that I was living on instant noodles. You saw me. You saw Jamie, and I was so desperate to just be Jamie for as long as I could. He ran a hand through his hair. When I went to Singapore, my uncle froze my personal accounts. He cut my lines of communication. It was a war, Audrey. A brutal, ugly war. It wasn't 3 months. It was 8. By the time I won, by the time I'd wrestled control of the company back and had the breathing room to even think. I was with Noah. Audrey finished, the pieces clicking into place with agonizing clarity. I flew back, Julian said, his voice hollow. I went straight to the apartment. It was empty. I found you. You were at an art fair in Ghirardelli Square. I saw you. You were laughing. And Noah Sterling. He kissed you. And you were wearing his ring. Audrey remembered that day. She'd been so fragile. Noah had been charming, stable, attentive. He was the safe harbor after the storm of Jamie's disappearance. He had seemed like the answer. I broke Elle, Julian whispered, looking out at the bridge. My heart. It just shattered. I thought you hadn't waited. I thought you'd moved on. I saw him so polished and successful, and I was just this wreck who'd been through a corporate hell. I thought I'd lost my chance. So I left. I went back to Singapore. I became Julian Carter. I built my own empire separate from the family's. I buried Jamie so deep I wasn't sure he still existed. Until tonight. Audrey said, tears welling in her eyes. Why tonight, Jamie? Why now? I've always kept track of you, Elle, he admitted, turning to face her. I couldn't help it. I told myself it was just checking. I saw you get married. I saw your first gallery show. I saw when he divorced you. I saw your name disappear from the society pages. I read about Danielle DeWitt. You came here for me. No, he said, and the honesty stung. I came here because my board is pressuring me for a massive merger with SoftBank, and the investors are old-fashioned. They want a stable family man. They're trying to set me up with daughters of other billionaires. I came here tonight to tell the curator of the new wing to back off, to stop trying to play matchmaker. He stepped closer. And then I walked in, and I saw you. And she, that woman, was cornering you. And he just stood there and let it happen. The man you left me for. He let them tear you apart. And in that second, Audrey, my entire world went red. All I knew was that I had to protect you. I had to get you out of there. I had to put you so far above them they could never ever touch you again. So you made me your fiancée, Audrey said, a shaky laugh escaping her. I did, he said. It was impulsive. It was the most Jamie thing I've done in 15 years. Julian, Jamie, she started. You can't. This lie. It's huge. The Gazette. Page 6. By morning, this will be global news. It will affect your merger. It will affect everything. I know, he said, and I don't care. But you did it to save me. I can't let you. Shh. He gently touched her face, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. It started that way. It started as a shield. But the moment I said it, the moment I said my fiancée Audrey, I realized something else. He looked deep into her eyes. I realized I've been a damned fool for 15 years. I should have fought for you. I should have come back from Singapore, kicked his door down, and told you the truth. I let pride and heartbreak make my decision. I am not making that mistake again. Before Audrey could respond, the terrace doors flew open with a bang, slamming against the library wall. What in the hell do you think you're doing? Noah Sterling stood there silhouetted against the light. He was drunk, and he was shaking with rage. Noah stormed onto the terrace, his face a blotchy, furious red. His tie was loose, and he was holding a tumbler of whiskey so tightly his knuckles were white. Fiancé, he stammered, jabbing a finger first at Audrey, then at Julian. You think you can just take her? Make me look like a fool. Audrey instinctively stepped back, but Julian didn't flinch. He simply stood, a calm and dangerous monolith between Audrey and her ex-husband. You're drunk, Noah. Julian said, his voice flat. Go back to your wife. My wife, Noah laughed, a broken, ugly sound. My wife is currently in the ladies' room hyperventilating. Do you know what you just did? You just humiliated Danielle DeWitt. In public. Do you know what her father will do to my new fund? You ruined me. Audrey stared, sickened. He wasn't angry that she was with another man. He wasn't even jealous. He was terrified. He was furious that her social promotion had just torpedoed his own. Let me get this straight, Julian said, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. You are angry not because you lost Audrey, but because you backed the wrong horse. Noah sputtered. She was my wife. She's a Potter, and you waltz in and what, you're engaged. It's a lie. You're lying. Tell him you're lying, Audrey. Don't you dare speak to her, Julian snapped, and for the first time Audrey heard the ice-cold authority of the CEO. Julian took one step toward Noah, who instinctively recoiled. You made yourself look like a fool, Noah. Julian said, his words like chips of ice. You did it the moment you let that vapid, cruel woman corner your ex-wife. You did it every day for the last 2 years that you let Audrey, the best thing that ever happened to you, feel small so you could feel big. You don't know anything about us, Noah yelled, emboldened by the whiskey. I know everything, Julian countered. I know she supported you for the first 4 years of your marriage while you were finding yourself. I know she sold her own art pieces she loved to fund your first failed startup. I know that the second you had a taste of success, you found her quaint and unambitious. You traded a woman of substance for a brand name. You didn't divorce a wife. You liquidated an asset you no longer understood the value of. And you do, Noah sneered. What's this, Carter? Some kind of billionaire pity project? Find the sad little ex-wife and dress her up. Julian smiled. It was a terrifying expression. You still don't get it, do you? You think this is new? You think I'm a stranger? Julian looked at Audrey, a quick, silent question. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Tell him. She didn't meet me tonight, Noah, Julian said. I met Audrey Vance 15 years ago in Berkeley. We lived together. We were in love. She knew me when I was Jamie, a broke coder in a drafty apartment. She loved me. Not the name, not the money. Noah's face went from red to a sickly pale gray. The comprehension dawned with dawning abject horror. Wait. Jamie. The one from college. The one she was with before you, Julian clarified. The one she left because I was incommunicado fighting a war you can't even comprehend while you were whispering sweet nothings and offering her stability. Second twist. I'll tell you something else, Noah. When I was Jamie living in that awful apartment coding my first algorithm, I wasn't broke. I was already a millionaire. I was testing a theory. I was testing her. I wanted to know if she loved me or what I could be. And she passed. She loved me. She wanted to build a life from scratch. You were the one who cared about the money. You were the one who couldn't see the diamond because you were too busy looking for glitter. Noah looked as if he'd been physically struck. He staggered back, leaning against the balustrade. No, that's not possible. He was doing the math. He realized the scale of what he had thrown away. He hadn't just divorced a Potter. He had divorced the one true love of Julian Carter. You didn't just dump your wife, Noah, Julian said, his voice pitiless. You dumped the woman who passed the test you would have failed. And now you're upset that the diamond you discarded is being set in a crown. That, as I believe they say, is a you problem. The terrace doors opened again, this time more slowly. Danielle stood there. Her makeup was slightly smeared, her eyes red-rimmed and venomous. Noah, we are leaving, she hissed. You are an idiot. Noah looked at his new wife, his face a canvas of regret and despair. He looked at Audrey, who was standing tall, her hand now linked with Julian's. He looked at the man who had in the span of 10 minutes taken back the woman he'd thrown away and simultaneously destroyed his social and financial future. Without another word, Noah Sterling turned and followed his wife, a defeated, broken man. The terrace was silent again, save for the distant sound of the city and the faint swell of the orchestra inside. Audrey was shaking. The entire confrontation had been brutal, primal. She turned to Julian. "Thank you," she whispered. "Jamie, that was... I've never had anyone stand up for me like that. Not even... Well, he never deserved you," Julian said simply. He took off his tuxedo jacket, and in a gesture so familiar it made her heart ache, draped it over her shoulders. It was warm and smelled faintly of him. "But Julian," she said, huddling into the jacket, "what you said, it's still a lie. We're not engaged. You've just torpedoed your SoftBank merger and declared war on the DeWitt family. For a ruse. To save me from a moment of embarrassment." "It wasn't a moment," he said, turning to look at the bridge. "It was the sum of 2 years of moments. And as for the merger, let me worry about that." "No, I can't let you. Tomorrow you can release a statement. Say it was a misunderstanding. That I'm just an old friend. I'll go to Napa for a week. I'll disappear. They'll forget." "Will they?" He turned back to her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "And will you go back to being the ghost? The invisible woman?" I don't know." He took her hands. "I have a confession, Elle. What I told Noah was mostly true, but I wasn't just protecting you tonight. I was being selfish." "What do you mean, Yee?" "The merger, the board. It's all true. They've been pressuring me to marry for a stable image. They've paraded a line of suitable bloodless heiresses in front of me for months. I've rejected them all. My board is unhappy. They see a single 40-year-old CEO as a loose cannon, a liability." He took a deep breath. "When I saw you tonight and I said those words, my fiancée, it wasn't just a shield for you, it was a shield for me. And the second I said it, I knew it was the only answer." Audrey pulled her hands back. "So, what you want to use me? You want me to be your stable image?" The accusation hung in the cold air. "No," he said, his voice pained. "No. That's not... Elle, look at me." She met his gaze. He was vulnerable. The billionaire was gone. This was Jamie. "This is a crazy idea. It's insane. But what if we made it real? Not a lie for the press, but a real engagement. A chance. We're not those kids in Berkeley anymore. We're two different people shaped by a lot of pain. But maybe we could be something better. I don't want a pretend fiancée Audrey. I don't want a stable image. I want you. I want to see if Jamie and Elle still exist." Audrey was speechless. This was not a rescue. This was a proposition. I need time, Jamie. This is everything, all at once. My ex-husband, you, your life. "I know," he said gently. "I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I'm asking you to not run, to stay, to let me court you, to let me show you who I am now, and to relearn who you are." He reached into his pocket. Audrey's heart stopped. He pulled out a ring. But it wasn't a small, simple ring. It was without a doubt the most magnificent, terrifying diamond she had ever seen. It was a flawless 10-carat Asher cut set on a simple platinum band. It blazed even in the dim light of the terrace. "Oh, Julian, no," she whispered, recoiling. That's not me. That's Danielle." "I know," he said, his lips twitching. "This was my grandmother's. It's the Carter ring, the one my board wants to see, the one the world expects." He held it out. "I'm not asking you to wear this for me, or even for us. I'm asking you to wear this for them." He nodded back toward the ballroom. Wear this as armor L. Wear it as a shield. Let it be the thing that stops the whispers and the pity. Let it be the thing that gives you the space you need to think. He wasn't proposing. He was arming her. Slowly, Audrey looked at the ring. It was a fortress. It was a statement. It was everything she'd just been humiliated for not having. She held out her left hand. For tonight, she said, her voice clear. And for tomorrow, for the space to think. He smiled a true brilliant smile. For as long as you need. He slid the ring onto her finger. It was heavy. It was cold. It was impossible. It's a bit large, she whispered. It'll stop traffic, he agreed. Ready to go back in. Audrey. Vance took a deep breath, the weight of the Carter diamond on her hand, the weight of Julian's jacket on her shoulders. She looked at the man beside her, a ghost from her past, a stranger, and terrifyingly her future. Yes, she said. When they re-entered the ballroom, the effect was instantaneous. The orchestra was playing, but the music was secondary to the furious, hushed gossip. Beatrice Finch, the columnist, saw them. Her eyes zoomed directly to Audrey's left hand. Her jaw dropped. Audrey Vance, the ignored ex-wife, was no longer a ghost. She was a queen, and she had just taken the throne. The next morning, Audrey's small, sunlit apartment in Sausalito felt like the eye of a hurricane. The world outside had not just noticed her. It had detonated in her name. Her phone, which she'd finally retrieved from her purse at 3 a.m., was a smoldering brick of notifications. It had vibrated itself off the nightstand twice before she simply put it on silent, watching the screen light up with a relentless, silent strobe of calls and texts. It was a beacon of a life she didn't recognize. Her laptop, open to the Nob Hill Gazette, was headlined by a fawning, breathless column from Beatrice Finch. The title was set in an obnoxiously large font. Carter's surprise heiress, reclusive billionaire Julian Carter, engaged to artist Audrey Vance. A love story for the ages. A love story for the ages, Audrey muttered, sipping her tea. She wrote that 6 hours after wanting to see me publicly executed. The article was a masterpiece of social revisionism, painting Audrey as a brilliantly talented reclusive artist, rid poor and a mysterious figure, rid invisible, who had clearly been in a secret passionate love affair with the world's most eligible bachelor for years. Beatrice had, of course, sensed their deep connection from the moment she saw them. It was everywhere. Page 6 had a grainy photo snapped from across the ballroom of Julian sliding the massive Asher-cut diamond onto her finger. The Daily Mail had a rival, even blurrier shot of Noah Sterling, his face a mask of apoplectic rage, being physically steered out of the gala by a furious-looking Danielle. Forbes had already published a 1,000-word speculative piece on what this surprise union with an unknown meant for the upcoming SoftBank merger. Her email inbox was a similar disaster zone. It was a digital stampede of people who 24 hours ago wouldn't have given her the time of day. The most galling was from Galerie Antoine in the financial district. The owner, Etienne, a man with a tiny ponytail and monumental disdain, had personally rejected her work just 4 months prior, calling her sculptures a bit too rustic for our clientele. His new email, sent at 5:04 a.m., was dripping with sycophancy. My dearest Audrey, I was so hoping to run into you last night. My profound congratulations on your wonderful news. Julian is a longtime patron, and we are simply ecstatic for you both. I've been reconsidering your Earthly Vessels series, and I believe I was mistaken. The pieces have a raw, powerful honesty that the market is crying out for. I would be honored if you would consider my gallery for your next solo show. September, perhaps. Our biggest month. Let's make it happen. Warmest regards. Etienne. She closed the laptop with a snap. Then came the voicemails. Old college friends she hadn't heard from in a decade, all so happy for her, all needing to catch up immediately. Her parents had left 7 messages, a frantic, escalating volley of confusion. Is this a joke? Excitement? A billionaire Audrey? and practical worry. But what about Noah? Is this legal? And then in their own special category were the texts from Noah. They were a perfect chronological diary of a man's complete psychological disintegration. 1:12 a.m. Audrey, you can't be serious. 1:45 a.m. This is a joke. You're doing this to hurt me. It's pathetic. 2:30 a.m. Danielle is. This is a mess. We need to talk. You don't know what you've done. 3:15 a.m. Her father is pulling his seed funding from my new venture. He's pulling it. You've ruined me. Are you happy? 4:05 a.m. He's not who you think he is, Audrey. He's a shark. He'll crush you. He's using you. 6:15 a.m. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. For everything. Please, call me. 7:30 a.m. I still love you. I've always loved you. Audrey stared at the last one. The lie was so profound, so desperate, it made her feel nauseated. She held her thumb over the block button, then stopped. Not yet. She wanted to remember this. Instead, she just deleted the entire thread. She walked to her window overlooking the gray-green waters of the bay. She was wearing an old paint-stained sweatshirt and leggings, but on her left hand the Carter diamond felt like a beautiful, heavy monster. It was cold. Every time she moved, it caught the morning light and threw blinding, arrogant prisms of color across her walls. It was a fortress. It was a cage. The night had been a surreal whirlwind. After Noah and Danielle's disastrous exit, Julian had been the perfect gentleman. He'd stayed for another 45 minutes, just long enough to be seen. He'd introduced her to the museum's curator as my fiancée, the artist Audrey Vance, and the woman had nearly fainted with delight, immediately promising to commission a piece for the new atrium. Then he had driven her home not in a Rolls-Royce or a Maybach, but in a quiet, dark gray Audi. He'd walked her to her door, his tuxedo jacket still draped over her shoulders. The silence in the car had been thick, not with awkwardness, but with 15 years of unsaid things. At her door he'd taken her hand. He hadn't tried to come in. He'd just looked at her, his expression one of profound, unreadable emotion. Sleep, he'd said, his voice low. The world will be loud tomorrow. Ignore it. I'll call you in the morning. We'll just have coffee. Away from all this. He'd leaned in and kissed her, but not the way she'd half expected, half feared. He'd kissed her on the cheek, a gesture of simple, profound tenderness. Now in the quiet of her apartment, she was still wearing his jacket. It was on the back of her chair, smelling faintly of him, a scent of expensive wool, cold night air, and something else. Something familiar. She was nursing her second cup of tea, her mind a jumble of past, present, and an impossible future, when there was a knock on her door. Not the buzz from the downstairs lobby. A sharp, direct knock on her actual apartment door. Audrey froze. Her blood ran cold. The press. They found me. They've gotten past security. Her sanctuary was breached. She crept to the door, her heart hammering. She looked through the peephole. Her breath caught. It was him. No security. No suit. He was wearing dark jeans, a simple charcoal gray Henley that stretched across his shoulders, and the same worn brown leather boots she remembered from 15 years ago. He was holding a cardboard tray with 2 large paper cups. She unlocked the deadbolt, her hands shaking, and opened the door. He smiled. Not the cool, assessing smile of Julian Carter, not the polite, charming smile from the gala. It was the Jamie smile, the one that was slightly crooked, the one that crinkled the corners of his eyes. I figured you'd be out of coffee, he said. I brought Blue Bottle. I remember you said it was the only one that didn't taste like sadness and regret. A laugh, real and rusty, escaped her. I did say that, didn't I? You did. His eyes met hers, and the noise of the world seemed to fade. Can I come in? Oh, yes, of course. She stepped back, suddenly hyper-aware of her messy apartment, the clay dust on the floor, her own paint-smeared sweatshirt. He stepped inside and his presence seemed to fill the small space. But he didn't look at the mess. He looked at her world. His eyes traced the shelves full of books. He walked to her work table, gently touching a small, flawed ceramic bird. "You kept this one," he said, his voice soft. "The kiln cracked it and you were furious. You said it was ruined." I remember," she said, stunned. "I told you the crack was what made it beautiful," he finished. He turned to her. "It's perfect, Elle, all of it. It's you." "It's not the Legion of Honor," she said, taking the coffee he offered. It was hot, and the gesture was so normal it was jarring. "Thank God for that," he said. They stood in an awkward, charged silence. The world's newest, most famous couple standing in a small Sausalito kitchen surrounded by clay dust. "The world is going crazy," Audrey finally said, gesturing to her dark laptop. "Let it," Julian replied. "I'm not here about the Nob Hill Gazette, or the merger, or Danielle DeWitt." He looked at her, his expression suddenly serious, vulnerable. "I'm here for coffee, and I'm here because I meant what I said last night, all of it. I don't want to pretend. I don't want an arrangement." Audrey's hand tightened on her cup. "Jamie? Julian, I don't know what to call you." "Call me Jamie," he said, his voice urgent. "Please." "Jamie," she said, testing the name. "This," she held up her left hand and the diamond flashed, "is the biggest arrangement in the world. This isn't Jamie and Elle. This is Carter Industries and the Potter." His face tightened as if she'd struck him. "You're right, it is." He took a deep breath. "Which is why I need you to give it back to me." Her heart didn't just drop. It plummeted, smashing into the pit of her stomach. Of course, it was a one-night rescue. The show was over. He was here to retrieve his property. She was the fool, the Cinderella whose carriage was turning back into a pumpkin, leaving her covered in clay dust. "Oh," she said, her voice flat, all the warmth gone. "I see. The armor is no longer needed." She began to twist the massive diamond off her finger, her knuckles white. "Audrey, wait. That's not—" "No, it's fine," she said, her voice brittle. "I get it. It was an incredible gesture. You saved me. And now, you need your grandmother's ring back. Thank you. For the loan." She was Audrey the transaction all over again. She pulled it off and held it out to him, the space between them suddenly a cold chasm. He looked at her pained, angry face, then at the ring in her hand. He didn't take it. Just for a second, Elle," he said quickly, his voice pained. "Put it on the counter." Confused, she dropped the ring on her kitchen counter. It landed with a heavy, expensive clack. "That ring," he said, "was for them. It was armor. It was a statement. It was a tool. It was the loudest thing I could say without speaking. It wasn't a gift. It was a weapon." He never took his eyes off her face. He reached into the pocket of his jeans, not a tuxedo, and pulled out a different box. A small, worn, dark blue velvet box. It wasn't from Harry Winston or Cartier. The velvet was faded at the corners as if it had been carried for a very, very long time. "This," he said, his voice thick with an emotion that made her own throat tighten, "is for you." He opened it. Audrey's hand flew to her mouth and a sob escaped her. It wasn't a diamond. It was a sapphire. A deep, perfect cornflower blue bezel-set sapphire flanked by two tiny twinkling diamonds on a simple antique gold band. You remembered," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "I remember everything, Elle," he said, his own eyes shining. "I remember the antique shop on Telegraph Avenue. You were 23. You dragged me in. You saw this. You said diamonds were too loud, that they were for people who needed to shout." "And sapphires," she whispered, the memory rushing back, "are like holding a piece of the sky." "We couldn't afford it," she said, the tears streaming freely now. "It was $400. We had to pay rent." I went back the next day, Julian said, his voice cracking. I sold the only thing I had of value that my uncle hadn't frozen, my grandfather's watch. The one I told you was just a knockoff. I bought this. I was going to give it to you that night. But you left, she choked out. I put it in my bag for the flight to Singapore, he said. I thought I'd be back in a week. And then the world fell apart. I've been carrying it for 15 years, in briefcases, in coat pockets, in safes. It was my penance. It was my compass, to remind me of the one time I was a man I was proud to be. I've been carrying it, waiting for you. He took her left hand, the one that felt so light and bare without the 10-carat fortress. This isn't armor, Audrey. This isn't for the board. This isn't a lie, and it's not a tool. This is a question. He looked up and she saw him. Not the billionaire, not the savior, just Jamie. Her Jamie, his heart in his eyes. I'm not asking you to be my fiancé for the world. I'm asking if I can be Jamie again, and if you'll be my Audrey. She was sobbing now, a messy, cathartic, cleansing cry for the girl she'd been and the woman she'd become. She didn't say anything. She just nodded, her entire being shouting the word. Yes, she finally whispered. Yes, Jamie. Yes. He smiled a smile of pure, unadulterated relief and slid the sapphire onto her finger. It fit perfectly. It wasn't cold, it wasn't heavy, it was warm. It wasn't a cage, it was a home. He pulled her to him and he kissed her. It wasn't a chaste kiss on the cheek. It was 15 years of waiting, of regret, of fame, of loneliness, and of a future that had impossibly found its way back to them. The parenthesis of 15 lost years was finally closing. On the counter the Carter diamond lay forgotten, its fire dimmed by the morning sun. Outside the world could clamor and speculate. The phones could ring. The Danielles and Noahs of the world could rage. It didn't matter. The diamond had been a statement to the world. The sapphire was a promise to her. The ghost at the gala was gone. And Audrey Vance was finally truly seen. Audrey's story isn't just about revenge. It's about being seen. It's about how the people who broke you can never be the ones to define you. The world tried to tell her she was nothing but the right person. The person who reminded her she was everything. What do you think Danielle and Noah did the next day? Do you believe in second chances, even with a 15-year gap? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you loved Audrey's journey from an invisible ex-wife to the most talked-about woman in the city, please hit that like button. It truly helps our channel and tells us you want more stories just like this. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a single dramatic twist. You won't believe whose story we're telling next. Tonight, the grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Museum of Art glittered with New York's elite. The air, thick with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume, buzzed with the low hum of powerful conversations. But all of that stopped. A hush fell over the crowd, a collective intake of breath as the doors opened one last time. It wasn't a politician or a movie star that commanded such silence. It was Lachlan Beaumont, the notoriously private tech billionaire, a man who moved markets with a single memo. But it wasn't him that made them gasp. It was the woman on his arm, elegant, poised with a smile that held a universe of secrets. Whispers turned into a frantic search of memories. "Who is that?" one socialite hissed. Then a prominent real estate developer, Michael Brown, dropped his champagne flute. The crystal shattered on the marble floor, a sound as loud as a gunshot in the sudden quiet. He knew exactly who she was. She was the woman he'd thrown away like yesterday's news. She was his ex-wife. Rosemary Davies believed in the quiet magic of building a life. For 7 years that life was built around Michael Brown. She had met him when he was a junior architect with wild dreams and blueprints that covered every inch of their tiny Brooklyn apartment. She was the one who brewed his coffee at 3 a.m., who typed his proposals, who believed in his vision of glass and steel towers long before a single foundation was ever laid. She put her own dreams, a forgotten sketchbook filled with elegant furniture designs and bold interior concepts, into a dusty box under their bed. His dream was her dream, and for a time it was enough. Michael's star began to rise slowly at first, then with dizzying speed. His firm brown designs landed a prestigious contract for a midtown skyscraper. Suddenly, their world changed. The tiny Brooklyn apartment was traded for a sterile minimalist penthouse overlooking Central Park. Dinners of takeout eaten on the floor were replaced by charity galas where Rosemary felt like a wilting flower in a room of exotic, thorny blooms. She tried to keep up. She bought the right dresses, learned the names of the right people, and perfected a smile that didn't quite reach her tired eyes. But she could feel Michael slipping away. He began to look at her not with love, but with assessment. He'd critique her choice of jewelry, the way she engaged in small talk, the fact that she preferred a quiet night in to another deafening social event. "You're not trying, Rose," he said one evening, loosening a tie that cost more than their first month's rent. "Brittany Adler was there tonight. Her father sits on the board of the Van Doren Group. She knew everyone. She connects." Rosemary's heart clenched. Brittany Adler was a fixture in the society pages, a woman who seemed born in a couture gown. "I'm not Brittany, Gregg. I'm the woman who believed in you when you were sketching on napkins." "Exactly," he said, and the coldness in his voice was a physical blow. "You're the woman from the before. I'm living in the after now." The final conversation happened a month later. It wasn't a fight. There was no shouting. It was worse. It was a business transaction. Michael sat her down on their white leather sofa, a piece she had always hated, and laid out his terms. "This isn't working," he began, avoiding her gaze. "I've achieved a certain status, and my partner needs to reflect that. It's about image, about branding. You understand business, Rose." "I'm not a brand, Michael. I'm your wife," she whispered, her hands trembling in her lap. "And I appreciate everything you've done," he said, the words practiced and hollow. "But I've outgrown this. I've outgrown us." He finally looked at her, and his eyes held a mixture of pity and impatience. "Look at you, Rose. You're sweet. You're comfortable. But you don't have that fire, that ambition. You're content to be in the background. I need someone who shines in the spotlight beside me." She felt the blood drain from her face. Every sacrifice, every late night, every ounce of faith she had poured into him was being dismissed as a lack of ambition. He was erasing her from his own success story. "So that's it?" she asked, her voice cracking. 7 years just over. I've been seeing Brittany." He admitted the final nail in the coffin. "She understands my world. It's for the best, Rose. I'll be fair in the divorce. You'll be comfortable." Comfortable. The word was an insult. He was offering her a severance package for a life she had co-authored. She looked around the cold, impersonal penthouse. He had designed a space that had never felt like home. She saw nothing of herself in it. He had already erased her. She walked out with one suitcase and the dusty box from under the bed. She didn't look back. As the divorce papers were finalized, she saw the announcement in a society magazine: architect Michael Brown and socialite Brittany Adler, the city's new power couple. The photograph showed them laughing, clinking champagne glasses at a gallery opening. Michael looked triumphant. He had his trophy, his brand, his woman who shone in the spotlight. Rosemary Davies, meanwhile, was left with the crushing realization that he hadn't just left her. He had made her feel worthless, like a rough draft he'd crumpled up and tossed aside on his way to the finished masterpiece. And in the suffocating loneliness of a cheap motel room far from the city lights, she finally opened the dusty box and stared at the forgotten dreams inside. The noise of New York was a constant mocking reminder of the life she'd lost. Rosemary knew she couldn't heal there. She needed silence. She needed the ocean. With the modest settlement from the divorce enough to live on for a year if she was careful, she drove north with no destination in mind until the scent of salt and pine filled the air. She found herself in Kennebunkport, Maine, a small coastal town that was the complete antithesis of her former life. She rented a small weathered cottage overlooking a rocky shore. The first month was a blur of grief. She walked the beach for hours, letting the cold Atlantic wind whip tears from her eyes. The woman Michael had described plain, unambitious background noise haunted her. Had he been right? Had she truly become nothing more than a shadow? One rainy afternoon, trapped inside with the sound of waves crashing against the shore, she finally opened the sketchbook. Her fingers, hesitant at first, traced the lines of chairs inspired by seashells, tables that mimicked the flow of water, and lighting fixtures that looked like captured starlight. A flicker of the old Rosemary, the girl with dreams before Michael, ignited within her. She started small. She found a discarded broken rocking chair at a local flea market. For a week she worked tirelessly on it in her small garage, sanding the old wood, reinforcing the joints, and reupholstering it with a simple, elegant gray linen. When she was done, it was no longer a piece of junk. It was a work of art, a blend of rustic charm and modern minimalism. She placed it by her window, and for the first time in months, she felt a sliver of pride. Her work became her therapy. She started frequenting local antique shops and estate sales, finding broken, unloved pieces of furniture and breathing new life into them. Her cottage slowly transformed from a barren rental into a curated space of beauty and comfort, a home that was uniquely hers. One day, while sketching in a local coffee shop, a man paused by her table. She was so absorbed in her drawing of a new bookcase design that she didn't notice him at first. "That's a clever use of tension rods," he said, his voice a low, pleasant baritone. Rosemary looked up, startled. The man was dressed simply in a worn flannel shirt and jeans, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. He had a quiet intensity about him. He didn't look like a tourist. "Oh, thank you," she said, instinctively closing her sketchbook. "Please don't," he said, gesturing to the book. "I'm sorry to interrupt. My name is Lachlan." He offered a hand. His grip was firm. "Rosemary," she replied. "You're not from around here," he stated, not unkindly. "Is it that obvious?" she asked with a small wry smile. "Only because I know just about everyone else," he chuckled. "I have a place up the coast. I come here to escape." "Escape what?" she asked, intrigued. "Noise," he said simply. "Meetings. Expectations." "You—" "The same, I suppose," she said, the understatement hanging in the air. Lachlan pointed again at her sketchbook. "You're an architect, a designer." "I wanted to be an interior designer," she confessed. "A long time ago." He saw the flicker of pain in her eyes and didn't press. Instead, he asked about her design, and for the next hour they talked, really talked. Not about society or status or branding, but about the integrity of old-growth wood, the beauty of clean lines, and the way a room could make you feel. He listened with a focused attention that made Rosemary feel seen in a way she hadn't in years. They began to meet regularly, sometimes for coffee, sometimes for long walks on the beach. He never asked about her past, and she never asked about his. He was just Lachlan, the quiet man from up the coast, who understood the language of design and saw the passion in her work. He saw her Rosemary, not the ex-wife of Michael Brown. One afternoon he came to her cottage to help her fix a leaky faucet. When he stepped inside, he stopped dead in his tracks. He walked slowly through the small space, his eyes taking in every detail: the restored rocking chair, the reclaimed driftwood coffee table, the way she'd arranged the lighting to create a sense of warmth and peace. "Rosemary," he said, his voice filled with genuine awe. "This is incredible. You didn't just furnish a house, you gave it a soul." He turned to her, his gaze serious. "The world needs to see this. This talent you have is a gift." Rosemary felt a blush creep up her neck. "It's just a hobby." "No," Lachlan said firmly. "It's a vocation. Have you ever thought of starting your own business?" She laughed, a sad, bitter sound. With what I have enough money to last another 6 months maybe. Starting a business takes capital connections. Everything I don't have. Lachlan was silent for a long moment, his eyes studying her with an unreadable expression. What if you did? He asked quietly. What if you had an investor? Someone who believed in your vision completely. People like that don't just fall out of the sky, Lachlan. Perhaps one just did, he said, his voice steady. Let me be your first client. I have a guest house on my property that's a complete wreck. I want you to redesign it, carte blanche, and let me be your first investor. We'll draw up a business plan, create a proper company. I'm not offering a handout, Rosemary. I'm offering a partnership. I think it would be a very, very wise investment. Rosemary stared at him speechless. This quiet man in a flannel shirt was talking about investment capital and business plans as if it were the most natural thing in the world. For the first time, a wild, terrifying seed of hope began to take root in the barren soil of her heart. She wasn't just Michael Brown's discarded past. She was a designer, an artist, and someone finally saw it. Okay, she whispered the word, feeling monumental. Okay, Lachlan, let's do it. The guest house project was a whirlwind. Lachlan, true to his word, gave her complete creative freedom. The structure was a beautiful old stone building that had fallen into disrepair. Rosemary poured all of her rediscovered passion into it. She sourced materials from local artisans, designed custom furniture, and spent her days covered in sawdust and paint, feeling more alive than she had in a decade. Lachlan was a constant quiet presence. He'd bring her coffee in the mornings and review blueprints with her in the evenings. He never interfered, but he challenged her. Are you sure that's the boldest you can be? He'd ask, pushing her to trust her instincts. Their professional partnership deepened into a personal one built on a foundation of mutual respect and a shared love for creating something beautiful out of nothing. During this time, the true scope of Lachlan's life began to reveal itself, not through his words, but through the quiet efficiency with which things happened. When she needed a rare type of reclaimed wood, a truck carrying it arrived from Oregon 2 days later. When she worried about the legalities of forming a company, a high-powered lawyer from Boston called to walk her through the process. One evening, looking up a detail for a supplier, she casually Googled his full name, Lachlan Beaumont. The screen filled with articles from Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, and Wired. Tech titan Lachlan Beaumont, the reclusive billionaire behind Aura AI. Beaumont Philanthropies pledges billions to green energy. She felt the floor drop out from under her. The quiet man in the flannel shirt who helped her fix her faucet was one of the wealthiest, most influential men in the world. She felt a surge of panic. This was the world she had run from, a world of power and status far beyond even Michael's wildest ambitions. She confronted him that night, her heart pounding. "You're Lachlan Beaumont," she said, holding up her phone. He didn't flinch. He just met her gaze, his own calm and steady. "Yes," he said. "Does that change anything?" "It changes everything," she exclaimed. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted you to know me, Lachlan, the man who loves the smell of sawdust and thinks your design for that reading nook is genius," he said, stepping closer. "I didn't want you to see the billion-dollar portfolio. I wanted you to see me, the same way I saw you, not as someone's ex-wife, but as the incredibly talented artist standing right in front of me." His sincerity disarmed her. He hadn't hidden his identity to deceive her, but to protect the authenticity of their connection. In that moment, she realized the profound difference between him and Michael. Michael used his status as a weapon and a measure of worth. Lachlan saw it as a responsibility and often a burden to be escaped. She stayed. And her company, which she named Title Design, was born. The completed guest house was a masterpiece. It was a perfect fusion of rustic Maine charm and breathtaking modern luxury. Lachlan invited a few friends who turned out to be Silicon Valley CEOs and international art collectors for a weekend unveiling. They were blown away. By the end of the weekend, Title Design had 3 new clients, each with a multi-million-dollar project. Word of mouth in those ultra-exclusive circles was more powerful than any advertising campaign. Rosemary's aesthetic, authentic, soulful, and impeccably detailed was a breath of fresh air in a world of sterile, ostentatious wealth. She hired a small, dedicated team and set up a proper studio in Portland. Her personal transformation was just as profound. The success wasn't just Lachlan's money. It was her vision, her hard work. Her confidence, once shattered, was now forged in the fires of her own achievements. She traded her worn-out sweaters for tailored blazers and bespoke dresses. Her posture changed. She walked into boardrooms and construction sites with an air of quiet authority. She was no longer a shadow. She was the light. She and Lachlan fell deeply in love. It was a mature, peaceful love, free of the drama and insecurity that had defined her marriage. With him, she felt not like an accessory but a partner. He celebrated her successes as if they were his own, and listened to her fears without judgment. About a year and a half after she'd fled New York, Lachlan came to her with a proposal that made her blood run cold. Beaumont Enterprises just acquired the old Sinclair Hotel on Park Avenue, he said, spreading a huge blueprint across her desk. It's a landmark building, but it's been gutted by neglect. We're turning it into the most exclusive private residence in the city, the Beaumont. Her eyes scanned the massive project scope. It was an architect's dream, a designer's magnum opus. It's an incredible project, Lachlan, she said, her voice tight. I know, he said, his eyes twinkling. And I've told my board there's only one firm I trust to handle the interior architecture and design for the entire building. He paused, his gaze softening. Tidal Design. Rosemary stared at him, her mind reeling. New York, Park Avenue. It was the heart of the world she had run from, the world of Michael and Brittany. This wasn't just a project, it was a reckoning. It meant returning to the city that had broken her not as a victim, but as a force to be reckoned with. This will put you on the global stage, Rose, Lachlan said gently, sensing her hesitation. This isn't about looking back. This is about claiming your future, in the very place that tried to tell you that you didn't have one. She looked from the blueprint to the determined, loving face of the man beside her. He was right. Running had saved her, but returning would define her. Okay, she said, a slow, determined smile spreading across her face. Let's show New York what Tidal Design can do. The Beaumont project was a monster, a glorious, all-consuming beast. For months, Rosemary and her team were immersed in the monumental task. They flew between Maine and New York weekly, setting up a satellite office in a sleek Soho loft. Rosemary was no longer the woman who shied away from the city. She strode its streets with purpose, commanding meetings with contractors, artisans, and city officials. She was decisive, creative, and utterly in her element. The New York real estate and design world was a small, incestuous community. Whispers began to circulate about the mysterious new firm that had snagged the most coveted design contract of the decade. Tidal Design never heard of them. They're from Maine, of all places. I heard Lachlan Beaumont's new girlfriend is running it, a classic case of nepotism. Rosemary heard the rumors. They stung, but they didn't stop her. She knew the quality of her work would be the only answer that mattered. She poured every ounce of her talent into the project, creating spaces that were not just luxurious, but also deeply human and breathtakingly innovative. As the project neared its first major milestone, the invitation arrived. It was printed on thick, cream-colored cardstock, the lettering an elegant gold foil. The annual Metropolitan Architectural Guild Gala, the absolute apex of the industry's social calendar. It was being held, as always, in the grand halls of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The keynote speaker this year, Michael Brown. Rosemary's heart hammered against her ribs as she stared at the invitation. It felt like a trap, a deliberately engineered collision. We don't have to go, Lachlan said that evening, finding her staring out the window of their temporary suite at the Carlisle Hotel, the invitation on the table beside her. Yes, we do, she said, her voice quiet but firm. My company is the lead on the biggest residential project in the city. Brown Designs is a major player. If I don't show up, they'll say I'm hiding. They'll say the rumors are true, that I'm just the billionaire's pet project. I've worked too hard to let them think that. This isn't about them, Rose, he said, turning her to face him. This is about you. Are you ready to face him? She thought for a long moment, recalling the broken woman who had fled the city 2 years ago. She was gone. In her place was a woman who had built a company, who had found love, who had rediscovered herself. I'm not the same person, he knew Lachlan. Let him see that. The night of the gala was a flurry of preparation. Rosemary had chosen her armor carefully. It was a gown by a little-known designer. She admired a column of deep emerald silk that clung to her silhouette. It was elegant and powerful, not ostentatious. Her hair was swept up in a graceful chignon, and the only jewelry she wore was a pair of diamond earrings, a gift from Lachlan that glittered like captured stars. As she looked at her reflection, she saw a stranger and herself all at once. The familiar shape of her face, but with new lines of confidence around her eyes, and a strength in her jaw she hadn't possessed before. Lachlan entered the room impeccably dressed in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo. He stopped and simply stared, his expression one of pure adoration. The world is going to stop turning tonight, Rosemary, he murmured, offering his arm. As their car pulled up to the museum's grand entrance, a sea of flashing cameras erupted. The press went wild at the sight of the reclusive Lachlan Beaumont. Mr. Beaumont, who are you with tonight? They shouted. Lachlan leaned down to the reporters, his voice calm and clear, a protective hand on Rosemary's back. I am here tonight in support of the most talented designer in the country, he said, his voice carrying over the din. This is Ms. Rosemary Davies, founder and lead designer of Tidal Design. He didn't call her his girlfriend or his partner. He called her a designer. He gave her the credit, the professional respect she had earned. With his words as her shield, she took a deep breath, lifted her chin, and walked with him up the stone steps and into the lion's den. The grand hall was precisely as Rosemary remembered, a swirling kaleidoscope of black ties, glittering gowns, and forced laughter. Heads turned the moment they entered. A wave of whispers rippled through the crowd as people recognized Lachlan Beaumont. Their eyes then slid to the woman on his arm, a picture of grace and understated power. There was a flicker of confusion, then dawning recognition on a few faces. From across the room, Michael Brown stood at the center of a fawning circle of admirers, Brittany Adler preening at his side. He was holding court, a glass of champagne in one hand, gesturing grandly as he spoke about his firm's latest visionary project. Brittany, draped in a garish diamond-encrusted red gown, laughed a little too loudly at his jokes. Someone from his circle noticed the commotion at the entrance and nudged him. Greg, look. Isn't that Lachlan Beaumont? I wonder who he's with. Michael turned, a condescending smile on his face, ready to dismiss another social climber. The smile froze, then melted away, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. His hand went slack. The champagne flute slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The sound was sharp, definitive. It cut through the chatter, drawing every eye in their vicinity. And in the ensuing silence, everyone followed his stunned gaze to the woman standing beside the most powerful man in the room. It was Rosemary. But it wasn't. The mousy, agreeable woman he had cast aside was gone. This woman was luminous. Her confidence was a palpable aura, more dazzling than Brittany's diamonds. She met his gaze from across the room, and there was no pain in her eyes, no anger. There was nothing. It was the calm, polite disinterest one reserves for a stranger. That look more than anything gutted him. The crowd began to buzz, the pieces clicking into place. That's his ex-wife. The word spread like wildfire. Rosemary Brown. No. Someone said her name is Davies now. What is she doing with him? Brittany's perfectly made-up face contorted with jealousy and confusion. Greg, what is it? Who is that? She demanded, her voice shrill. But Michael couldn't hear her. He was trapped, mesmerized by the ghost of the woman he thought he'd erased. Slowly, as if pulled by an invisible string, he and Brittany began to walk towards them. The crowd parted, sensing the impending drama. Rose, Michael said, his voice hoarse as they came face to face. I can't believe it's you. Rosemary gave him a cool, placid smile. "It's Rosemary Davies now, Michael. It's good to see you're well," she said, her tone perfectly even. She then turned her gaze to the woman beside him. "Brittany, that's a vibrant dress." The subtle barb hit its mark. Brittany flushed a deep red, suddenly feeling cheap and overwrought next to Rosemary's effortless elegance. "What are you doing here?" Michael stammered, his eyes darting from Rosemary to the impassive billionaire beside her. Before Rosemary could answer, Lachlan extended a hand to Michael, his grip like steel. "Lachlan Beaumont. You must be Michael Brown. I've heard your name." His tone was polite but with an underlying current of ice. "Rosemary and I are here this evening as guests of the Guild. Her firm Title Design is handling the Beaumont project on Park Avenue." The second shockwave hit Michael even harder than the first. The Beaumont project, the most talked about, most prestigious, most ludicrously well-funded development in a generation. It was the contract every top-tier firm in the world, including his own, had been salivating over, and it had gone to her, to the unambitious woman he'd left behind. His professional arrogance warred with his personal disbelief. "Title Design," he repeated dumbly. I didn't know you had a company." "There's a lot you don't know about me, Michael," Rosemary said, her voice still quiet but now laced with a confidence that cut him to the quick. "I was busy building a life, not just an image." The color drained from Michael's face. Her words were a direct echo of his own cruel dismissal of her years ago. He looked at her, poised, successful, loved by a man whose influence dwarfed his own, and for the first time he felt the crushing weight of his mistake. It wasn't just regret. It was a chasm of loss opening up beneath him. He hadn't just thrown away a wife. He'd thrown away a diamond, convinced it was a common stone. And as he stood there, speechless and shattered, the whole of New York's high society watched and gasped. The morning after the gala, New York's digital society pages were a blazing inferno of speculation and shock. The image was everywhere: Michael Brown, his face a mask of disbelief; Brittany Adler, a study in scarlet-clad fury; and across from them, Rosemary Davies, serene and luminous on the arm of Lachlan Beaumont. The shattered champagne flute had become the defining symbol of the night, a crystal metaphor for a carefully constructed world falling to pieces. For Rosemary, the sudden glare of the spotlight was unnerving. Over coffee in their hotel suite, Lachlan scrolled through the headlines on a tablet, a wry smile on his face. "It seems you've become the city's favorite mystery," he murmured. Rosemary looked at a photo of herself, her expression calm and unreadable, and felt a strange disconnect. The victory was sweet, but the public nature of it left a bitter aftertaste. She had returned to prove her worth through her work, not to become the protagonist in a high society soap opera about her ex-husband. "I don't want this to be about him," she said quietly, tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "The work should be the story." "It will be," Lachlan assured her, his voice a comforting anchor. "But a story this good, people can't resist the opening chapter. Now it's your job to make the rest of the book so compelling they forget how it began." For Michael, however, there was no escaping the opening chapter. It was a public crucifixion. He walked into his gleaming office at Brown Designs to a chorus of strained "good mornings." He could feel the change in atmosphere. The air, once thick with deference, was now heavy with pity and morbid curiosity. His partners avoided his gaze. His assistant spoke in hushed, careful tones. The entire incident had painted him not as a powerful man who had moved on, but as a fool who hadn't recognized the value of what he'd thrown away. The narrative was a direct assault on his greatest asset, his infallible judgment. His nights were worse. The minimalist penthouse, once a proud symbol of his success, now felt like a vast, empty mausoleum. Brittany's presence did little to fill the void. She was a ghost of a different sort, rattling the chains of their shared public humiliation. He would sit in the dark for hours, the glow of his laptop illuminating his face as he obsessively consumed every article, every blog post, every scrap of information he could find on Title Design. He studied Rosemary's portfolio with a sickening mix of awe and self-loathing. Her work was everything his had ceased to be: warm, innovative, deeply personal. He saw her soul in the curve of a chair, her intelligence in the clever use of space. He saw the woman he had dismissed as simple and unambitious, and realized he had been looking at her with his eyes closed. The ambition had been there all along, a quiet, powerful force he had been too arrogant to see. This realization didn't inspire remorse. It ignited a dark, corrosive envy that began to consume him. His obsession became the third person in his relationship with Brittany. Every conversation became a minefield. "The Carlton Group is looking for a new firm for their headquarters," Brittany said one evening, trying to inject some normalcy into their strained dinner. "Your firm should be a shoo-in." "They'll probably go with Title Design," Michael muttered into his wineglass. "Everyone wants the visionary of the moment." The word was coated in sarcasm, but the bitterness was real. Brittany finally threw her napkin down, her carefully maintained composure shattering. "Stop it. Just stop talking about her. You're the one who didn't want her. Remember, you chose me. Or was I just a convenient upgrade, Michael? Don't be ridiculous." He snapped, but his eyes wouldn't meet hers. "Am I?" She pressed, her voice rising. "Look at me, Michael. When you look at me, what do you even see anymore?" He finally looked up, his gaze distant and unfocused. "You're looking through me," she whispered, the chilling realization dawning on her. "You're looking right through me at her ghost." He didn't deny it. In that moment, Brittany understood. She had never been the prize. She was a placeholder, an accessory chosen to match a certain lifestyle. Now that a far more valuable accessory had appeared, she had been rendered worthless in his eyes. Her status, her connections, everything she had brought to the table meant nothing compared to the one thing: she could never be the woman he so obviously, tragically wished he had back. Festering in his professional and personal ruin, Michael's envy curdled into a desire to destroy. He couldn't out-design her, so he would cripple her. He began to pull the insidious, invisible strings of influence he had spent a decade cultivating. A call to a friend at the Department of Buildings resulted in a sudden week-long stop work order on the Beaumont project, citing a trivial zoning variance. A quiet word with a union foreman led to a mysterious labor slowdown. Key shipments of imported materials were suddenly lost in customs, tangled in a web of red tape that hadn't existed a week prior. Rosemary and her team felt the pressure immediately. Each problem in isolation was a typical construction headache, but together they formed a pattern of deliberate, malicious interference. "This isn't bad luck," Lachlan said one evening, reviewing a spreadsheet of the escalating costs from the delays. "This is a targeted campaign. This has Michael's fingerprints all over it." Rosemary felt a surge of anger, but it was quickly replaced by a steely resolve. "He thinks he can bleed us out with 1,000 paper cuts," she said, her jaw tight. "He's forgotten that I'm the one who used to manage his budgets. I know how to handle a crisis. If he wants to fight me in the trenches, he'll find out I learned how to build." The final straw for Brittany came a week later. She came home late to find Michael hunched over his desk, not with his own blueprints, but with a set of documents she didn't recognize. They were sleek, professional, and bore the elegant watermark of Title Design. It was their proposal for the new Vanguard corporate headquarters, a contract known to be the next big prize in the industry. She watched as he analyzed it, his expression not angry but predatory. He was dissecting it, memorizing it, preparing to consume it and regurgitate it as his own. He was going to steal her work. In that moment, Brittany felt the last vestige of her connection to him sever. It wasn't just about his obsession with Rosemary anymore. It was about his fundamental emptiness. He was a fraud, a hollow man so desperate to maintain his image that he would resort to theft. She had attached her name, her reputation, to a sinking ship captained by a coward. Her decision was not born of morality or a sudden kinship with Rosemary. It was a cold, calculated act of self-preservation and vengeance. He wanted a mirror. She would show him the reflection of his own destruction. The next afternoon, Rosemary was at the Beaumont construction site, deep in a heated discussion with her site manager, when her personal cell phone buzzed with an unlisted number. She stepped away from the noise, expecting a supplier. "Is this Rosemary Davies?" The voice was clipped, manicured, and instantly recognizable. Rosemary's back stiffened. "It is. Who is this?" "It's Brittany Adler." A heavy silence descended. "What do you want, Brittany?" Rosemary asked, her voice cautious. "I'm not calling to exchange pleasantries," Brittany said, her tone brittle as glass. "I'm calling to give you a warning. Michael is playing dirty. He's not just trying to delay you. He's going after the Vanguard account." "What do you mean?" "He has a copy of your preliminary proposal. I don't know how paid off a junior designer hacked a server, I don't care. He's planning to use your core concepts, the sustainable atrium, the modular workspace design, and present them as his own in his final pitch tomorrow. He'll claim you stole the ideas from him, banking on his reputation to crush yours." Rosemary felt the ground shift beneath her feet. It was a vile, career-ending accusation. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, the question hanging heavy between them. There was a pause, and for a moment Rosemary could hear the faint sound of a shaky breath. "Don't mistake this for friendship," Brittany said, her voice dripping with a venom meant solely for Michael. "I'm just lighting the match. He's the one who soaked his own house in gasoline. I finally realized he never wanted a partner. He just wants a mirror, and his reflection is starting to look very, very ugly. Let him crash and burn. He deserves it." The line went dead. Rosemary stood amidst the dust and noise of the rising skyscraper, the phone feeling like a block of ice in her hand. Brittany hadn't offered her an olive branch. She had handed her a weapon of mass destruction. The game had just changed. This was no longer a war of attrition. It was time for a final decisive move. The click of the disconnected call was deafening in the sudden silence of Rosemary's hotel suite. She stood frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear, Brittany Adler's final venomous words echoing in the space where a conversation had been. It wasn't the shock of the source she had long suspected, the cracks in Michael and Brittany's gilded cage, but the sheer, unadulterated treachery of the act itself. Michael, the man whose early dreams she had nurtured like fragile flames, was preparing to burn her to the ground with an inferno of her own making. It was a violation that went deeper than professional sabotage. He was trying to steal her voice, her vision, the very essence of the woman she had fought so hard to become. For a fleeting moment, the ghost of the old Rosemary surfaced, the woman who would have crumpled, who would have cried, who would have accepted defeat as her due. The air left her lungs in a ragged gasp. But then something else took over. A cold, crystalline anger began to form in her chest, sharp and clear. It was not the hot, messy rage of a woman scorned, but the focused, righteous fury of a creator defending her creation. He had mistaken her kindness for weakness for the last time. She didn't hesitate. She called Lachlan, her voice devoid of panic, clipped and precise. "Get the core team. Meet me at the Soho office in 30 minutes. We have a problem." The office, usually quiet in the late evening, was soon buzzing with a tense energy. As Rosemary laid out the situation, the faces of her small, loyal team shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to collective outrage. Her lead architect, a young prodigy named Ben, slammed a fist on the conference table. "He can't do that. It's intellectual property theft." "He can, and he will," Rosemary stated, her calm silencing the room. "He's banking on his established name against ours. By the time we could prove it in court, the damage would be done. Our reputation would be tainted before it's even truly forged." Lachlan stood by the window, his expression unreadable, but his stillness radiating a dangerous calm. He didn't step in to take over. He watched her, his trust in her absolute. "What's the play, Rose?" he asked, his voice low. Rosemary turned to the large whiteboard that dominated the wall, uncapping a black marker. "Michael has our battle plan. He thinks he knows how we'll attack. So we don't attack. We render the entire battlefield obsolete." She looked at the faces of her team, seeing the exhaustion and fear warring with loyalty. "He's expecting a fight. We're going to give him a revolution. We are not saving our proposal. We are making it redundant. Tonight, we create Vanguard 2.0. A spark ignited in the room. The challenge, impossible and insane, was also intoxicating. For the next 8 hours, the office transformed into a high-stakes creative incubator. Fueled by gallons of coffee and a shared sense of purpose, they tore their own brilliant design apart to rebuild it into something no one, least of all Michael, could ever have conceived. Lachlan worked the phones, coordinating with his West Coast tech teams and his top patent lawyers who worked through the night securing the rights to every new innovation they devised. Ben and the architectural team sketched furiously, integrating responsive architecture that physically shifted based on occupancy and time of day. Rosemary, at the heart of the storm, was a whirlwind of decisive creativity, connecting disparate ideas, refining every concept, ensuring that every new element was not just a gimmick, but a meaningful improvement that served the design's core soul. Around 3 a.m., she stepped away for a moment, looking out the window at the sleeping city. She wasn't just fighting for a contract. She was fighting for the woman who had found her worth in a small Maine cottage, for the team that believed in her, for the love that had given her the space to grow. This wasn't about Michael anymore. This was about her. She would not let his shadow dim the light she had worked so hard to build. The next morning, as the sun cast long shadows across the city, they had it. A proposal so advanced, so complete, it made their original submission look like a relic. Rosemary felt the deep, bone-weary exhaustion, but beneath it, a powerful current of certainty. She put on her armor, a simple, impeccably tailored navy blue dress. She was not dressing to impress, but to command. At 11 a.m., when she and her team walked into the Vanguard boardroom, the atmosphere was polite but palpably flat. The board members looked weary, having just sat through what was likely a competent but uninspired presentation from Michael. Rosemary could feel the lingering ghost of his pitch in the air. She took her place at the head of the table, smiled warmly, and began. "Good morning," she said, her voice resonating with a quiet confidence. "We at Title Design believe that true innovation is a process of constant evolution. What we submitted in our preliminary proposal was a strong foundation, a starting point we were proud of. But in the weeks since, we've had a significant breakthrough." She clicked a button and the screen behind her lit up, not with blueprints, but with a dynamic, flowing animation. "We'd like to present you with what we're calling Vanguard 2.0. For the next 30 minutes, she held them captive. She didn't just present, she told a story. She began by acknowledging the very concepts Michael had stolen. A central green atrium, as you may have already discussed this morning, is a wonderful concept for employee wellness, she said smoothly. We considered that in our first draft. But then we asked ourselves, what if that atrium wasn't just passive? What if it was the building's living, breathing lung key? She unveiled the biofilters, the AI-driven climate modulation, the responsive lighting that mimicked circadian rhythms. She systematically took every one of her own ideas that Michael had presented and showed them to be nothing more than the first clumsy step toward a much grander vision. You could feel the energy in the room shift from polite interest to rapt fascination. She was not just winning them over, she was making Michael's entire presentation feel antiquated and small-minded. When she concluded, a palpable silence hung in the air. The CEO, Ms. Chen, a woman known for her sharp intellect and sharper eye, leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "Ms. Davies, that was an extraordinary vision. It's also curious. Mr. Brown's presentation an hour ago was, as you seem to anticipate, remarkably similar to the core ideas of your preliminary submission." This was the moment, the checkmate. Rosemary met Ms. Chen's gaze with unwavering calm. "Then I'm flattered," he agrees. "Our starting point was so strong." "A great idea is a great idea," she said, a masterclass in professional grace that simultaneously exposed Michael's lack of originality. She then added the final devastating blow. "However, the board should be aware that the Vanguard 2.0 systems we've shown you today, from the responsive architecture to the biometric wellness integrations, are all proprietary, patented, and digitally watermarked as of 4 a.m. this morning. This evolution of the design is exclusively the intellectual property of Title Design. The implication landed with the force of a physical impact. The board members exchanged glances. They didn't just understand, they were furious on her behalf. She hadn't just proven her design was better, she had proven Michael was a charlatan who had tried to cheat them with a pale imitation of her genius. 2 hours later, back in the tense silence of their office, the call came. They had the contract. The room erupted in a wave of cheers and relieved hugs. Rosemary leaned her head against the cool glass of the window, a genuine, unburdened smile finally gracing her lips. That night she stood with Lachlan on the terrace. The city lights, once a symbol of her failure and heartbreak, now shimmered with promise. "You did more than win today," Lachlan said softly, his arms wrapping around her waist. "You showed him and the world exactly who you are." Rosemary leaned back into his embrace, breathing in the cool night air. The frantic anger was gone, replaced by a profound sense of peace. The ultimate victory, she realized, wasn't seeing Michael fall. It was the unshakable knowledge that she had risen entirely on her own. He hadn't just lost a contract. He had lost the chance to know the woman she had become, a woman whose worth was not a reflection of any man but a brilliant, self-sustaining light of its own. He hadn't wanted her, and for the first time she was truly, deeply grateful for it. Rosemary's journey wasn't about the revenge or even about the billionaire. It was about the incredible transformation that can happen when you stop letting someone else define your worth. She went from being a forgotten chapter in her ex-husband's story to writing a best-selling epic of her own. Her story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the most painful endings are just the beginning of a life you were always meant to build for yourself. It's a testament to the fact that true success isn't about who is standing beside you, but about the strength you find standing on your own 2 feet. If her story of resilience and self-discovery moved you, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who might need to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next story. What part of Rosemary's triumph resonated with you the most? Let us know in the comments below.